introduce our show.
Welcome to Standup Memories. Thank you,
Because
Jackie.
it's his turn.
It's my turn. Standup Memories. Jackie, Martling, Peter Bales, and our absolutely tremendous guest, Rory Rosegarten, who is
Tremendous.
the manager of managers and the head of a terrific company called the Conversation Company Limited.
How about this? Right off the bat, to snag them, let him just list his clientele. Go ahead.
We were talking last time about Robert Klein, but that's only one. He's got an incredible roster.
Well, I've been working as manager for Ray Romano for almost 40 years. Brian Regan, Gary Valentine, Tom Green, Frank Caliendo. There's a lot of people.
Great people.
And many people over the years.
Yes.
One of your former clients, John Ferrantino, told me about you, something that I think is really, really cool. And it says to me,
I would have never guessed it was that big.
I know, no, it says to me, you followed the right career path. He told me that one time he saw you in your office on 4 phones at the same time, trying to keep 4 conversations straight in your head and going crazy with these phones. And in the middle of it, you looked up and said, I love this.
Yeah. Well,
And
I
that is-
absolutely
there was
believe that.
one little part of that story that you didn't get.
Okay.
Right. The reason I was
In the middle of it, you were trying to hang up on Frank.
the reason I was on 4 phones, this way I didn't have to talk to John.
I did not mean to step on that.
When you stepped on it anyway.
No,
Yeah,
I
that's
didn't
all
even
right.
dawn on me.
Yeah.
That is
Oh,
great.
that
Yo,
is-
I'll tell you a funny John story.
Listen, we are only going to bash Ferrantino for another couple
No.
episodes.
This is a great story. This is one of the prides of my life. So there used to be a show. What the hell was the name? Comic Strip Live? Was
Yes.
that it? Yeah. And they kept using my guys. And I'm from New York, and I would go to the show. So I would fly out to LA. So I finally said to the producer at the time, do one show with all my guys. I have to come out once.
So you're going for each one.
Right. So he agreed. And we did the show with all the guys, and I was in the hotel. John Ferrantino had come, and he was going to do a bit that required a string of cocktail franks. And we couldn't find a string of cocktail franks. We found loose cocktail franks.
Because
I
they're kosher?
I swear on my... You're going to stick the juice stuff in no matter what.
No, I mean, I didn't mean that as a joke. I mean,
Can I tell my story, please?
I was asking a question.
I love it.
Sit on your mouth and let me...
I was asking a very legitimate question.
So I'm in the hotel. We didn't know what to do because the gag was at the end of the bit, he pulls out a string of cocktail franks. It's a very funny bit, but we couldn't find them. We looked all over the place. And I was in the hotel with a needle and thread sewing hot dogs together. I swear. John will tell you the story.
That's hysterical.
And that's when I knew I was in for life. Yeah.
Well,
That's
that
got to be
shows,
one of your fondest
fondest.
memories.
yeah, but that shows how into each one of your acts, and each day was
Well,
a different
I
day.
always loved comedy. It wasn't just the business of doing comedy. I walked a fine line because there are managers who are great at what they do, but they're businessmen.
Yes.
And then there are managers who go the other way. And I kind of straddled both sides. But I love the art of comedy. I
Yes.
appreciated it, and I loved it. So it was as much fun for me working on the set and getting, put this joke here, put this joke there. I never wanted to be a manager who just said, yeah, that's pretty good, that's good. I wanted to roll up my sleeves and get into it with them. I always wanted my clients to feel they weren't alone and 2 heads were better than one.
You're in the trenches.
Yeah, I always deferred to them. They're the comedians, they're the ones who have to do it. But it was also, I would always tell them the truth, even if it hurt, but it was my opinion. You could tell me to take a walk, but the reality was that's what I thought. And I enjoy that. I enjoy it to this day. It's fun.
You're not going to stop anytime soon.
Well, the funny thing is, when I started out in 1980, it was the comedy business.
Right.
And now it's the comedy industry. It's changed. It really has changed.
Dramatically.
Yeah, the companies are big. They're multi-companies, and their stock price, and none of that existed in the beginning. It was more of a creative art. It was neglected and ignored regularly. Now the New York Times has a comedy writer, and it's a serious thing. But I still try to bring the old way of doing it into the new way of doing it.
Rory,
But it's a little bit of a mismatch, right? It's a tough intertwining.
Yeah, because it's an art form. You can't take that away. It's an art form, and unfortunately, with big business, sometimes that gets lost as you go. And I try as much as I can, not because the old days are better than now, but I try to incorporate that into the new way of doing things.
now, Rory, most new comedians and comedy fans out there really have no idea what a manager does. And let me make a statement. Let's see how Rory reacts to it. Comedians out there, especially new comedians, it's relatively easy to find a manager. Finding the right manager, finding a good manager is one of the toughest challenges you're ever going to have.
Well, that's accurate, because it's you and the comedian versus the world.
Right.
That's the way it is. And I've always approached it where I'm sort of the brother. I never approached it from a business standpoint. My head doesn't work that way. You have to, it's someone that you trust, and someone you believe in, and someone who understands what you do and how you do it, and can bring something to the table. That was my approach to it. I'm not saying that's the way everybody does it. That's how I do it.
What about
not to flatter you too much, but you have been so respected in your field for as long as I remember, from the word go.
Nice.
It was we all grew together. I had my flame and it went out, but you've just got to the top, and you had a climb, but once you hit the climb and you went,
you had a
it's
flame.
magical.
I had an ember. I prefer that's my career.
Well, you couldn't get anybody to blow on it.
Yeah, but it's not fair, because you are funny. You
Thank
are
you.
funny.
Yeah, to me, he's comedy royalty.
Yeah,
he really is.
Yeah, other comedians really look up to you.
Oh, well, I thank you so much for that. And I'll tell you something. We got to get Rory to talk about Long Island's own, a guy we knew from your one-nighter on a Wednesday night that was a tough crowd, and that's Ray Romano. He's
the greatest.
He's the greatest.
The greatest. First of all, before anything, he's a great guy. Ray and I have been through
He
everything.
says two words,
Yeah.
and you can sense that he's a great guy. I think.
He's very genuine, and he's really funny. And if you go to dinner with him, he's laughing at your jokes. He's not holding court. He's the most regular guy. He's married. He's got 4 kids. His family's very close. They fight in every family. He's as normal as could be. He's the best comedian of my career, who with material. He can read a script. I remember when I started out and I was young and I wanted to make my point and whatever. And then you get older and you realize he's really good. He gets a visceral sense of the material, and you don't argue with him because he's always right.
Yeah.
And the reason Ray has always done really good projects because they speak to him. He's another one who doesn't make a decision based on the business, ever. Everything is at the crux of whether the material itself is great material.
If it fits.
And that's why everything he does is really good. really good. And
Everybody likes him.
He's the best guy. He's the greatest guy.
I don't know a single comedian who doesn't have great things to say about him, and that's a lot of comedians.
That is very weird. In all these years, I don't think I've ever heard a negative word about the guy.
No, and it's funny. Think about this, because I agree with you. The press, right? And they can be kind of tough. It's 40 years almost. There's never been a bad thing about the guy, because he's a gentleman and he's not a BS artist, and he's just a good guy.
He's genuine because his show, Everybody Loves Raymond, came out of his act. He created that.
Well, the interesting thing was, I was the executive producer of Everybody Loves Raymond, and so I got to see everything firsthand. And the good thing about his stand-up was he talked about real things in his life, and it translated to the audience because they knew it happens to them too.
Yeah.
Which somehow is a great equalizer. He's not lecturing or talking down to you. He was one of them. And when he would talk about his mother, he's talking about their mother. Because you start to realize that the common denomination between everybody is that everyone is the same. Everyone's the same, the sauce is different. You know?
Yes,
So
It's so weird because in an obscure way, and I don't know if I ever said this out loud, but in my mind, his show ran exactly parallel to The Honeymooners.
Correct.
Because
Correct.
Jackie Gleason and Audrey,
Correct.
they were a battling married couple.
But they loved each other.
That truly
right.
loved
They
each other.
truly
I mean, it
loved
was
each other.
it was apples and oranges, but it was the same
But the funny thing-
identification.
But think about what you're saying now. So the Honeymooners and Raymond, right? Years and years, decades apart. That's how we are. That's our experience. It doesn't change that much.
No.
You know, you fight with your wife and you love your wife.
A caveman and a cave
That's
woman
right.
is the
Correct.
same thing.
Correct.
Same
Same
The
thing.
Flintstones,
Same
right. The Flintstones in between.
That's right.
I love it. That's
That's
great.
right. But he's a really great guy, and I've had nothing. I'll tell you an inside baseball thing about him. Ray and I are working together 39 years is what it is. We have never had a fight in 39 years.
I'm sure we could do something
No,
about
listen. Listen.
That's something.
We disagree on things.
Right.
We have disagreements about this or that. But we never hung up on each other, or it just never happened. It's just never happened.
I believe that. He's that kind of a
totally
guy.
He is. He's that kind of guy.
And-
but that goes back to what you were talking about when you were talking to the comedians and saying that you have to find the right manager.
Right.
Ray and I, there's a frickin' frack. I don't take any of the credit for his genius at all. None. That's something that's a God-given thing that he has, and he's great at it. But when you're working with Ray, he's listening to what you say. It's not because I'm Ray, I'm right. He wants to hear what you have to say, and if he has a good idea for a joke, if it's from the maintenance man,
He wants-
says,
he
"Thank
wants
you."
the
Yes,
bounce.
He
Right,
wants the
right,
input.
right.
He lets everybody do their job. You know, I remember at the height of Raymond, when we were renegotiating the deal, because we had only made a 5-year deal for him, and the show is now going on 9 years, and it was the #1 show in America. We named what we wanted. And one thing that Ray said to me that sticks in my mind, and this was about 2000, 2001, somewhere in there, 2002, and he said to me, "Is it fair for them?" When we were making the deal.
Wow.
He wanted to make sure, he wanted to get what he deserved, and he wanted to get, but he wanted to make sure it was fair for them too. What else do you say to a guy
What else?
who says that?
Who else would say that?
Who else
I
says
believe
that?
it. Yeah.
I don't know that I would be as generous, you know?
Yes.
And he was very, here's another thing he did. He took out of, when we negotiated with CBS, and they were great to us, great. They were nice people, and everyone was great, you know? When you're hit, everyone is great to everybody. And he took some of his share and gave it out to the others because he wanted everybody to participate. That's That's him.
That doesn't happen on every
No,
show.
it doesn't happen. Doesn't happen in life, let alone a show. But it made him feel better, and everybody loved him in the cast, which is also the last thing I'll say. That the stars loved him. They all got along great. But he got along with all the cameramen and the costumers and the hair.
Which is
people.
huge.
He wanted a family, but it wasn't a calculated thing. It's just how he was. We went home every night on that show, 6 o'clock. Why? Shows don't go home at 6 o'clock. They work till 12 o'clock because everybody had kids and families. And Phil Rosenthal, the head writer on the show and the executive producer on the show too, he was very adamant about that. Ray was adamant about that.
That's great.
Yeah.
But sometimes, and again, new comedians, not necessarily young. You don't have to be young and new, but not necessarily going together.
Next week, Peter's going to address his point.
You don't even know what my point is.
I just know it was 5 minutes to go, 10 minutes ago.
All right, we're going to get to the inside of this.
We're going to get to the inside of everything.
Manager extraordinaire. We're going to get to the inside of Rory Rosegarten.
We're already inside. We're having
inside.
fun.
We're going to get further.
And I have a special thing that he ticked me into, but I'm leaving it because we ran up with he's a spectacular guest, and we also have to tell him about our other guest because he's being held in esteem gang.
Yes.
And when we tell you who the other guests are, you'll either feel heralded or be like, and I'm with this group.
It's a good group.
Tell them we'll be back next week. Tell them to come back next week.
Check us out next week on Standup Memories.
Check us out.
All right.
Check us out.
It's going to be a groovy show. Am I dated?
I can't tell I'm dated.
Hey, a new episode of Standup Memories every Wednesday.
How exciting is that?
Starring me, Peter Bales, and right here, Jackie the Joke Man Martling.
Please follow us on social media. Search it out. What is it? Me space?
MySpace,
Your space?
TikTok, Instagram, Facebook.
Doodah, doodah.